5 o'clock, and we will now call to order the Historic Commission meeting of Tuesday, June 4th, 2024. Miriam, will you please do the roll call?
Yes, as secretary, I will do roll call. Dale Griffa.
Here.
Scott King.
Here.
Alan Luckett.
Here.
Mary Menterline. Here. Jeff Stephenson. And Mitchell, do you go Mitchell or Mitch?
Mitch.
Mitch Goff.
Here.
And Randall Hansen.
Here.
All right.
Okay, so we have a quorum. Very good. Moving on to item 3, comments from the public. Brian, were any comments sent in to you today?
Nope, that we're not.
Okay.
The audience, if anybody wants to comment.
Does anybody want to comment? Okay. Item number 4, minutes of the May 7, 2024 regular meeting. Would you like to read the minutes to us?
Absolutely not.
Okay. Are there any changes, corrections to the minutes that were forwarded to the commission? If none, is there a motion to accept the minutes as presented?
I move to accept the minutes.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to accept the minutes as presented. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, moving on to new business. Brian.
All right, so, thank you, Commission. Brian Schweigel, Senior Planner. This item, an informational presentation by historic preservation consultants on National Register of Historic Places nominations for Adams, Roosevelt, and Washington elementary schools has been over a 2-year process now since the Commission initially began discussing the potential to apply for a certified local government CLG program grant through the Wisconsin Historical Society in 2022. So it's been a long time coming, and we're certainly excited to be at this point. Just wanted to extend a quick thank you to a few folks who have assisted along the way. Representatives from the school district of Janesville, the 3 elementary schools themselves, staff from Hedberg Public Library, and other city staff as well, past Historic Commission members who are part of the commission as we've moved through this process, and then certainly not last but not least, we've got Jason Tisch from the Wisconsin Historical Society here, as well as a representative of our preservation consultant. I'll introduce Megan to run through her presentation of findings.
Welcome.
Thank you. So my name is Megan Daniels. I am part of the consultant team that worked on the 3 nominations for Adams, Roosevelt, and Washington elementary schools. I don't know how familiar everybody is with National Register writing listing processes, so I'll do, I don't want to be too annoying, so so to be eligible for the National Register, properties need to represent a significant part or role in history in different areas. They're broken down into criteria by the National Park Service, history, significant people who have played a role, architecture, engineering is common, and then archaeology. So Adams, Roosevelt, and Washington were all, we're recommending, or we're listing them in the National Register under criterion A in history in the area of education, but also under criterion C in the area of architecture for their beautiful architecture. We always go over locations. What's kind of interesting when you look at where the 4 schools are, they're in very distinct kind of quadrants. I was looking at the ward map over there to see if it lined up a little bit, but intentionally placed, I think, in different areas throughout the city to serve the constituents. Wilson was also constructed in this batch of schools, but it's already listed in the National Register, so safe. Each of the 3 schools is on a large lot with ample green space. Everybody has a baseball diamond. There's some paved outdoor recreation spaces. And those are, that larger space is the site that's included in the National Register boundary. It's part of the property as well as the physical school building itself. And then our schools. So up first, Roosevelt is a 2-story education building. It was constructed in 5 parts, beginning in 1929, designed by Madison-based firm Law and Potter, a wealth of schools designed by Law and Potter in Wisconsin. They also did the 1939 edition and the 1952, which is not well represented in that photograph. So from the exterior, there's a lot of cohesion in those additions since it was done by the same architects, and it flows really well. Great. Adams, constructed in 4 phases, similar also Law and Potter. They did the 1939 and the 1952 edition, so they flow like very seamlessly into each other. You can hardly tell. You can tell the difference, but it's very sympathetic and doesn't detract from that original 1939 school portion. And then 2 more additions, the 1976 library, Instructional Learning Center, I think is what it's called, is off the west elevation, so kind of in the back, so you don't really see it. And then the last edition is on the south end of the building and fronts on Walker and, you know, kind of effectively reorients the main entrance. I think that's where everyone really comes in now. And then Washington, also Law and Potter, 1939, constructed simultaneously with Adams, both of those using PWA funding. And then Law, Potter, and Nystrom is the successor firm. They did the 1952 edition, and that one especially like flows into the original facade, like mirrors it. And that 1994 edition, again, is off the back, so it doesn't detract from the original architecture or from the original plan. And it's done in a way that's sensitive to the original design, but also is recognizable as a later edition, which I think is good. You know, so to be significant for the to evaluate significance for the National Register, we develop an historic context. And for these being listed under 2 different criteria, we developed 2 different contexts, one under history. So if you did your homework and you read through the nomination, is a long history of, or a brief history of how education developed both in the state of Wisconsin and then also in Janesville specifically. And really what these 3 schools, as well as Wilson, represent is the transition in the early 20th century for a 3-tier education system with elementary, middle, junior high, and high school, and like a departure from the smaller 1-room or 2-room schools that were being added onto. And then what they also show with those later additions is just the way that the schools continue to evolve with evolving trends. The rest of the schools in Janesville weren't really built until the 1950s. So when the state of Wisconsin started to consolidate school districts following World War II, some of those first 1952 additions were, I think, constructed in response to that school consolidation to bring kids into these new neighborhoods that were also developing around those schools. And then the 1960s, 1970s editions, I mean, they're all learning centers. Everybody constructed a larger library, I assume, with different kinds of media in them too, versus just books. They all had little libraries in the beginning that were repurposed as classrooms later on. And then the 90s editions, I think, were, again, just Janesville kept growing and we need more room for these students. And so the 3 schools really represent those changes throughout the history well. They're the oldest schools, functional urban schools in Janesville. Our architectural context. So Roosevelt is an example of Georgian revival, which falls more into the colonial revival camp. I'm being a little jargony right now as an architectural historian. But colonial and Georgian revival more emulate the architecture of colonial America, and those designs that were happening at Roosevelt. It's the pediments, the toothed dentals, the cupola, repetitive windows, the coins that really represent that style. Make sure I'm catching everything here. And on the exterior, there's really no changes to the exteriors except for the replacement of windows. And at Roosevelt, they were replaced very sensitively with 9/9 light windows and 12/12 lights. So mimicking the same function profile is an important thing. And then Adams is an interesting one architecturally. Adams and Washington fall more into a classical revival style, which is emulating architecture of the Italian Renaissance, which is slightly different. And at Adams, you have the classical revival just in its kind of balanced proportions. There's pilasters, there's the really striking stone doorways. But then those elements are they're flat, they're a little austere, they're a little less stylized, and that is a stripped classicism, kind of a later period type of architecture that was happening more during the Great Depression and around World War II. And then in the back, at the rear entrances, there's these finials above that are kind of screaming Art Deco at you, which was really interesting. And so that was an interesting element. And then on the inside, there's these beautiful angular arches that denote the different lobbies. So the level of design and attention to detail that went into the school is really amazing. Amazing. Washington is a little more refined, I will say, just classical revival and stripped classicism, but just speaks really confidently with these like pilastered bays, the projecting bay in that first floor there that corresponds to the kindergarten suite, and then the doorway with the scrolled pediment and the pilasters. These are all just what's the word I'm looking for? Key character defining features of the classical revival style. And the gymnasium, the portico near the gymnasium is also like very stunning and stands out for the style. The interiors of the schools, they share a lot of characteristics, being constructed in the same time period and by the same architects. At Roosevelt, it does have its own features since it has a 1929 wing. So the corridor at Roosevelt is terracotta. And then in the little drinking fountain nooks with the ceramic tiles is, they might be in Wilson as well, but for these three is unique to Roosevelt and is really interesting. And then all of the schools have these double glazed brick half walls in the corridors. And then what is called the lobbies is where the entrances and the corridors run into each other, and each of those is signified by the angular arches at Adams and then the segmental arches in Roosevelt and Washington. And then we call them stepped drinking fountains with the glazed brick that have kind of those little layers that push back. And then the ceramic tiles in each of the drinking fountains. So they're all still there. And even the replacement, there are some new drinking fountains, but they were done, wrong way, in a way that preserves the historic character of those spaces. What else can I say about these? And then other character defining features, but also rooms. Each one has an activity room, which is like an auditorium with these the stages have scrolled steps. I don't think any of them have the original floors in them, but the gyms, to my knowledge, do still have their original floors. Each one has, I think, a glazed brick perimeter, and for the most part is intact. And the classrooms, in each school, and I thought interestingly, even into the 1950s, had these wood built-in cabinets that in the 1950s were meant to match, but in a blonder, more mid-century type of wood, and with I guess I'm getting ahead of myself, but so each of the classrooms is characterized by the wood built-ins, asphalt tile floors, polychromatic or polychromatic asphalt tile floors. I believe the kindergarten rooms are the only one that have proper linoleum floors. And then each of the kindergarten suites also has a little workroom that's separated by little knee wall cupboards, and then a kitchen on the other side, and a fireplace. Everybody has a fireplace in the kindergarten suite. So 1952 interiors, you can kind of see the same characteristics. I assume thanks to Law, Potter, and Nystrom for doing those additions. Asphalt tile floors, wood chalkboards, really charming, beautiful. And that's it. That was really fast. They're kind of dense documents, so I don't know if you have any questions that you wanted to ask. If you were able to slog through the verbal descriptions of each building.
Well, I mean, I told you, before we started the meeting here, how impressed I was with the writing. And it's a shame, it's like, I'm hoping that at some point, if people get a chance, the public, to be able to read what goes into these applications,
Sure.
because
Yeah.
it is, I was blown away. I mean, it is just beautiful writing, and I felt as though I was in those buildings. And kudos as well to the school district
Yeah.
for not going in and saying, guess what? We're just gonna put up drywall, or take all of this stuff down. I mean, it is just gorgeous.
Yeah. First, you just made my career for me, so thank you very much for complimenting me. And they are really remarkable schools on the inside. When you're in the older, the 20s, 30s, and 50s wings, you get into the 90s ones, and that's kind of what I remember growing up. And so they're really special schools, and amazing to see how intact they are. So there's that. Eventually, the National Register nominations they are available to the public. They're a little hard to get to sometimes. The National Park Service has a digital gallery where they eventually scan everything and put it online. And then locally, the Wisconsin Historical Society will, I believe, upload it to their database as well. So it kind of gets me to next steps, unless anybody else had.
Did you want to, before she
Questions.
talks about next steps, Brian, did you want to say anything about how we got to this point? Or do you feel that that's been covered already?
I certainly can. The city did apply based on the Historic Commission's direction for grant funding through the Wisconsin Historical Society, was successful in that, and ultimately hired Megan and her team at the UW Milwaukee Cultural Resource Management Office to prepare and submit the nomination materials that you see. Certainly have had a lot of collaboration from the very beginning with the folks at the school district of Janesville, as well as the three individual schools, and efforts through some of the other folks that I mentioned, particularly early on in the process. So certainly appreciate all the time and effort by lots of different people that have gone into this process and project.
Great. So next steps, the drafts are drafted. They're, I would say, like 90% drafted, or could be 99.9. We provided them to you to read, an opportunity to comment if you have comments that you want me to incorporate, or, just comments. You're kind of the sponsor here, so you should have a chance to review and comment as well. If they are amenable to you, or once I incorporate comments, I will submit them to, I guess Brian and I should talk about how we want to submit them, but generally, I would submit them to the Wisconsin Historical Society for their review. And then the National Register coordinator there would work with me again to do any comments that on their end that they would like to see happen in the nominations. Once they're okay at that level, they're presented to the State Review Board, is another committee that looks at all the nominations. I believe it's August and November are the next two meetings this year, and their backlog ebbs and flows depending on just what the year is looking like. And then I would present these all again to that state review board. And then they make a recommendation finally to the National Park Service, who gives it their stamp of approval for listing in the National Register. And that takes a little bit longer, and I have absolutely no idea how long it takes. I think it also depends on, what they got going on there, but I wouldn't anticipate that happening officially until next year.
Megan, I have a quick follow-up question.
Yep.
Is the presentation that you give to the State Review Board fairly similar to the presentation that you gave this evening, or do they require more in-depth information?
To my knowledge, I'm planning to give 3 separate redundant presentations to the State Review Board, unless they decide that I can consolidate the history portion. I will probably run through things a little more technically, with the architecture, but it'll be pretty similar. I did kind of do a copy and paste to get here today, but I do need to make sure I address each criterion specifically and separately for them, because they are being listed as individuals, not as a batch or like a district.
Anybody else have any questions for Megan?
I guess I had just one little comment. I did see that at one point in time, I guess Carol Cartwright had recommended that Adams be nominated in 1998. I didn't know if any of the other schools had been recommended by her as well, or anything that's outside of this realm that you might have run across. I don't expect you to know it off.
Right. I don't know if I read through the recommendation section. I would think that they all would have been. Just given the level of integrity that's still there. Definitely Roosevelt. But Washington too, I feel like she would have recommended them all eligible. So I don't know why it might have just been one.
Well, I only read through Adams, so. I
didn't read that section either, so here we are.
I did look at all the pictures, though.
Good, yeah.
And I did read briefly kind of like the highlights and the bullet points, so.
Yeah.
Just kind of wanted to know whether there was a fireplace in every kindergarten room or not.
Yeah, everyone. But they're not used anymore. Most of them were blocked, and I had to ask somebody to move cabinetry or something else out of the way so that I could confirm their existence and get a photograph. But all the kindergarten rooms have fireplaces.
The bubblers are the best.
Yes, the bubblers are the best. But I did not use the word bubbler in my nomination.
Well, thank you
Yeah.
so much for
Yeah.
this. This is very informative, and I'm just so thrilled that we're going through this process. And
Great.
excited for the outcome.
Yeah,
So,
thank you very much. I appreciate your kind words and your time.
thank you. All right. Moving on to the next item on new business, review of certificate of appropriateness, 2024-04 at 225 Sinclair Street. And Randy and I were the individuals that went and spoke with Sean Knott, the owner of the property. So do you want to kick us off?
Yes, so this is, they're actually adding an outbuilding that's going to be pretty low in the backyard. It's not going to be all that visible from the road. We did talk about what type of exterior that they're going to have, and they assured us that it was going to be like the main building. So that would be sort of an alpine, I think.
It's a Tudor
Yeah.
style, yeah, with the white and brown trim.
Right, with the wood.
Yeah, and really from the front of the house, which is here where you've got the 126, the only place that you might be able to see it, I know it's kind of hard to tell where I've got the cursor, is that when you approach this stoplight here at Garfield, a stop sign at Holmes and Garfield, where it's going to be sitting is down here in this valley. And literally, you might be able to see the roof, and that's about it from the road, because there is such a dip down into the property. I mean, it's a gorgeous lot.
Yeah, and a very beautiful house also.
Yes,
To keep it
yeah.
in that same type of facade is gonna be really nice, actually. A lot nicer probably than I would put in a place that can't be seen.
Yeah, and so if you're looking at the plans, you know, it's going to be long ways lengthwise there on that property. And some of the other foundation.
How old is the property?
1993, if I remember correctly.
It's not that old.
No. But they've got a large family and only a two-car garage, and so there's need for more storage space.
I didn't realize that was 93.
Yeah,
Doesn't have, okay.
yeah. So, any questions for us? I mean, in the packet that we have, you actually have a photo of the house, and they're going to replicate that, the woodwork part of the house, in the design of the shed. So is there a motion to accept this certificate of appropriateness, 2024-04?
I'll move to find that the proposed project meets the criteria for granting a certificate of appropriateness.
Thank you. Alan, a second?
I'll second.
Miriam, thank you. So we have a motion to find that the proposed project meets the criteria for granting a certificate of appropriateness. Any further discussion?
I think with where it's located at, the visibility, I mean, it's going to be, it's on the corner of Holmes and Garfield, so yeah, it's going to be kind of like down in that hollow, so how much visibility you're going to have is going to be kind of,
It's negligible.
yeah. And since the property is new, I mean, it's not going to have any adverse effect, I think, on the neighborhood.
It's very far away from the main house
Yeah.
as well. It's quite a journey to get down there.
Yeah, not only distance, but down.
Depth, yes, yeah, exactly. Okay, if there are no other questions or comments, all those in favor of approving the certificate of appropriateness 2024-04 meets the project meets the criteria for granting this certificate of appropriateness, say aye.
Right.
Aye, opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item number 3, at the end of the meeting last week, I brought up that the Tallman Arts Festival is coming up and wanted to get it on our radars sooner rather than later. And so, Mitch, what we have done in the past is that we have just, I'm not calling you out, but bringing you up to speed here on that we usually have a table at the Tallman Arts Festival, and we are there over the 2 days, and we take down our brochures, things that we have, and just basically talk to anybody who is interested in finding out what we do, what is the Historic Commission, and talk about all of the designated historic areas in Janesville. So, and I know that they just, did we find the dates, Brian?
Yes.
It's August.
Rock County Historical Society did send an email just within the last week or two to the city about registering for the Tallman Arts Festival. And so the 2 dates are Saturday, August 3rd, and Sunday, August 4th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. on both days. And so before we proceed with registration for the festival, I wanted to confirm with the group that that's something that you'd like to continue to do this year, and that we'll have adequate coverage on both days for purposes of making that registration.
I personally am very interested. I loved being there. I did the Saturday all day, and it was really a good opportunity to meet members of Janesville, who had questions, and I know it's a small small sacrifice to make, I think, but it is a way to put ourselves out into the public and join up, with an event that's going on at the Tolman House as well, with their arts festival. So, are we wanting to proceed?
Let's go.
Is there a cost to it involved?
Yeah, for nonprofit groups such as the Historic Commission, it's fairly nominal. I want to say it's $30 to register.
Yeah, the only thing we got to make sure is that we notice, if we end up manning the booth with a pair of people at a time, we just need to make sure it's noticed that we're not going to have any action, but we could have a quorum. That's the only thing.
I don't think we didn't I don't believe we ran into that at least on Saturday we didn't.
Well, I think we
so.
did post something, though, just in
Yeah.
case.
Yeah, our office handles that type
Yeah.
of thing for you as a group.
Okay, all right. So, do we need to make a motion on this, or just give you the go-ahead?
Yeah, we can go ahead now and complete the registration, and then I guess maybe at your next meeting, we can begin to talk time slots in terms of who wants to cover which. Typically, I'll put together a spreadsheet to talk about that and designate who's going to do what in terms of setting up and breaking down.
Will we be able to borrow a lot of the stuff was that your stuff, Alan? Or
No, the tent was Jeff Stephenson's, and I think James Wolf actually donated the chairs, but I got a couple folding chairs. I do have like a portable table if we need something, unless somebody else has something. Might be able to find something.
Yeah.
We can make it happen. I got a van to help move stuff.
Okay, well, we'll double check with Jeff then. Make sure that we can still use that. All right. Any other new business? If not, let's move on to item 6, old business, discussion of the Historic Commission training. So, Brian and I had a brief conversation, and so what will happen is that we're going to send out a link that will, or sort of like a survey that will allow you to rank your top 3 training sessions that you're interested in, and we will table this until the next meeting. And so you'll get a heads up that, what those top 3 hopefully are going to be. And Miriam, I really loved your idea of being able to see how we might be able to follow up with this being, the Historic Preservation Month. And is there a theme that may come out of some of this training that we can do that we can carry throughout the year? Okay. Any other discussion? Did I miss anything there on that, Brian? Okay. The second item there, discussion of historic district markers. Any update?
Yes, just a brief update for the group, maybe for the public's benefit, anybody watching here this evening. The Historic Commission has for some time now been discussing a system of markers or signs in our 13 designated historic districts in the community, and we've arrived at a replacement street signage program by which, when the city would otherwise replace street signs located within the boundaries of our historic districts, we do so with new signage that designates not only the name of the street, but also the name of the historic district. And so that program began fairly recently and will obviously take some time to complete. There may be some potential to advance that using fundraising opportunities that the Historic Commission has discussed in the past. And so the brief update for you this evening, at one of your recent meetings, you had inquired about receiving an indication or knowing in advance which streets were proposed for rehabilitation, and consequently which streets were proposed for replacement street signage. And that information is available online at the city's online mapping system. You can go to the city's homepage, and one of the main links from there is to the mapping system. And so you can see the street rehab projects that are proposed for, as of right now, 2024 as well as 2025. And if I may, the mapping system is very robust. There's a lot of information available there that may not necessarily be germane to your work on the Historic Commission, but is interesting anyway, by way of the city's public utility system, zoning designations. We do also have a layer that depicts the 13 historic district boundaries, and lots of other information as well. So highly encourage everyone to check that out.
Thank you. Okay, item number 7, Historic Commission announcements. Announcements, please remember, are limited to member activities, memorials, and non-political community events. Discussions of matters related to government business is prohibited. Do we have any announcements?
JATV just posted a video today called Tales of Our Heritage. So that's available for viewing, and that highlights the different groups that immigrated to this area. So that
We
is
have
now,
one of our storytellers
one of
here
our
with us.
people that spoke at that lovely events here at the
That was an
council.
incredible production.
Thanks a lot.
I cannot go on about, I really was very moved by that.
So yeah, share it on YouTube.
Yes.
It's on YouTube. Share it with the multitudes.
Good. Any other announcements? Okay, our next regular meeting will be Tuesday, June 18th, 2024, right here in this room. May I please have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So move.
Second.
I'll second.
All in favor? Say
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned.